Alright, so as millionaire coal baron Joe Manchin is still parading himself around trying to lobby for his Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, we are already starting to run into some hurdles here in the form of a fellow corrupted and corporate Democrat here, Krysten Sinema. So, here from CNN, they say Sinema raises concerns about proposed tax in Democrats' bill as lobbying intensifies for her votes. So, let's go ahead and look at some of the details here. They say Republican senators and the business community are mounting a full-court press on Senator Krysten Sinema to sink or substantially change the Democrats' economic package, arguing in private conversations that the new tax increases would hurt companies in her home state of Arizona. Okay, keep in mind, the tax increases that we're talking about here that were proposed by Joe Manchin in this bill is literally just a 15% corporate minimum tax. Okay, keep in mind that a lot of these billion-dollar corporations are literally supposed to be paying 21% as a corporate tax rate. Many of them on the Fortune 500 list don't even pay a single goddamn penny in corporate taxes. So this is basically just setting a 15% minimum standard, which is already lower than the current legal standard of 21%, which is also substantially lower than the 35% corporate tax rate that was in place under Obama before the 2017 Trump tax cuts that gave vast disproportionate amounts of the benefits to the wealthy. Like 83% of the benefits of that tax cut went to the top 1%, and middle and low income Americans are actually going to see a tax increase towards the end of the effects of that legislation. So we're talking about like literally the bare minimum of what would be considered reasonably acceptable for corporations that are making billions of dollars in profit on an annual basis to pay in federal taxes. So the fact that she has any problem whatsoever with a 15% minimum tax is just an absolute like slap in the face and a joke to anybody who is paying attention to this stuff. But they continue here with more details, saying in a private call with business groups on Tuesday, Sinema asked a question about the bill's proposed 15% minimum tax on corporations that gave them some hope for optimism. And she said, quote, "Is this written in a way that's bad?" Okay, Krysten Sinema, a senator, a representative of the American people, is directly asking in a private phone call corporations and their lobbying firms whether or not this bill is written in a bad way. I mean, just again, the corruption here is not even like behind closed doors. They're not even really hiding it. She is openly doing phone calls, directly asking corporate America what they want her to do here. Not her constituents, not average working class people within Arizona, the business community, okay? The billionaires and the corporations who are bribing her. So that in and of itself is just absolutely laughably ridiculous, but they continue here with more details, saying Sinema's office declined to comment about the call, but she has expressed concerns about other tax provisions as well, namely on raising taxes on so-called carried interest, which would impact private equity and hedge fund managers and raise $14 billion in the Democrats' bill. And Sinema has relayed to top Democrats that she wants that provision out of the bill, according to a source familiar with the matter. So I love the way that corporate media outlets decide to talk about this stuff. First of all, they didn't even question the fact that a U.S. senator is taking calls with corporations to ask them what her position should be on a bill, as if that's not just like brazen corruption. But on top of that, the way they're covering this, the so-called carried interest loophole, they point out that it's for private equity and hedge fund managers, but still, I mean, this is $14 billion being raised in this bill, okay, a tiny fraction of the overall cost of the bill, and still she has a problem with this. This is just like in-your-face ridiculous levels of corruption. This carried interest loophole basically allows these private equity and hedge fund managers to dodge the taxes that you and I and anybody else who's working for a wage has to pay in terms of their income, and you are paying a substantially higher percentage of your income than people who are making money off of private equity and hedge funds. It's just like completely ridiculous. But they continue saying that Sinema, the lone holdout among the 50-member Senate Democratic caucus who was blindsided by the news of the deal last week, has refused to tip her hand one way or the other on the bill, giving conservative critics of the bill reason to believe that they could convince her to change her mind, and Democrats are still confident that they could win her over, but also acknowledge that they have made, or that they may have to make some changes, particularly on tax provisions, to get her to a yes. So again, I mean, look at the mindset of the Democratic Party in this instance. They're not trying to wage some sort of an offensive pressure campaign to call out her brazen corruption or to try to get her to fit within the mold of whatever the rest of the Democratic caucus is supporting on this bill. They're literally just saying, well, we hope maybe if we undercut our already ridiculously watered down tax provisions, then maybe she'll get on board with it. Maybe if the corporations who she's taking phone calls with say that it's acceptable for her. Just completely fucking insane. But they continue saying that as she's been in talks with Democrats who have touted the bill's benefits, Republicans like Senate Minority Whip John Thune have expressed concerns about or to her about the taxes on companies and the proposal to hire new IRS agents to bolster tax enforcement. So on this IRS portion of this bill, there could be ways that it's implemented in a good way. There could be ways that it's implemented in a terrible way. If the money is actually going towards bolstering the IRS so that they have the capacity to go and target the biggest and wealthiest corporate criminals in the entire country, financial criminals like on Wall Street or billionaires and corporations who aren't paying their taxes. We're talking about hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars that has been lost because these wealthy entities are not paying the taxes that they're supposed to be. So if you implemented it in a way that actually goes after them, that would be a good thing. But if you're just adding more funding and hiring more people to the IRS so that they can continue disproportionately targeting low and middle income people, then that would be absolutely horrible. But I'm pretty sure that the concerns that John Thune has on the IRS provision would be much more in the fact that they could have a larger capacity to go after the same billionaires and corporations who are also bribing his campaign in addition to Krysten Sinema. But they continue with a quote here saying that she's analyzing it. The South Dakota Republican said of Sinema, keeps her own counsel, I think, as most of you know, and usually comes to her own decisions. Does she really, though? Does she really come to her own decisions when she's taking phone calls with corporations to ask what her position on this bill should be? I mean, not really independent-minded there, but he continues saying that she's pretty independent of any pressure that she might get from either side. So I think she's going through that process right now. So she's not independent from pressure from either side, okay? This isn't about like Democrats versus Republicans. This is an entirely corrupted politician, okay? It's a completely different dynamic here. This isn't about pressure from the left or pressure from the right. She's just listening to the capitalist class, okay? She's listening to corporate America, which is inherently right-wing or affiliated with right-wing economics there. So the idea that like she's equally pushing back against the right and the left, no, she's giving fully into whatever the demands are of the right-wing capitalists who have control over her. But they continue saying on Wednesday, Sinema indicated to CNN that she was in no hurry to announce her position on the bill. She's, quote, taking my time, and her spokesperson reiterated that Sinema was waiting for a review by, of course, the Senate parliamentarian, and saying that it had to be completed before she was going to announce her position. So the same Senate parliamentarian who doesn't actually need to be in this job at all, the Democrats could just fire this person and not listen to what they have to say. They have absolutely no real underlying authority in any capacity whatsoever, but it's the same Senate parliamentarian that Krysten Sinema used as an excuse to not support the $15 minimum wage when she did that cutesy little thumbs down when she was voting against that measure. So 100% just a complete excuse here. If the Senate parliamentarian says that something can't be included in this bill, again, Democrats don't have to listen to a single goddamn thing that the Senate parliamentarian says. They could just simply ignore them. They could fire them. They could replace them. They could overrule them. All of those different things. So that's just 100% a made-up excuse to give Krysten Sinema the opportunity to potentially gut this bill even further than where it's already at right now. But they continue finally down here saying in the private call with Sinema on Tuesday, Seaton expressed the business community's opposition to the 15% tax provision, noting that would particularly hurt or hit manufacturers that take advantage of an accelerated depreciation tax deduction that lowers their tax burden. So, I mean, they're literally complaining about a 15% goddamn corporate tax rate. All right, again, keep in mind, under the 2017 Trump tax cuts, which already were to the benefit of corporate America and the wealthiest people in the country, that's somehow not good enough for these corporations, okay? Even 21% is too much for them. So they're already coming out here and complaining about a 15% tax, which is like half of what average Americans pay in their income tax. So, I mean, these motherfuckers are just criminals at this point, and I don't really know how much more I could say about Krysten Sinema. I mean, in a similar vein to Joe Manchin, they're just completely corrupted politicians. She's taken hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars from the same corporations who she's now taking those phone calls with. So it's just pay to play. I mean, plain and simple. She's not somebody who's acting in good faith. She is somebody who is acting 100% to the interests of the capital class. So, at the end of the day, we're going to see what we're going to end up with this bill. We could end up with absolutely nothing. This is a perfect case study in what we call the rotating villain theory, where, sometimes it's going to be Joe Manchin coming out, some particular provision within a bill, or, in Build Back Better it's in its entirety. Then it's going to be Krysten Sinema the next week. And if it wasn't for Joe Manchin or Krysten Krysten Sinema. Believe me, there would be other corporate Democrats who are stepping in to fill the same roles that they are filling right now. So really, I mean, this, whether it's on the tax provision that targets hedge fund managers or whatever she has a problem with, she's just making up excuses, okay? There's no reason to justify opposing that type of a measure. There's no reason to be in opposition to this bill from a right-wing perspective. If anything, the pushback to the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 should be coming from left-wing politicians, should be coming from people who recognize that Joe Manchin, a millionaire coal baron, managed to, in their so-called climate bill, get a bunch of tax breaks and subsidies for the fossil fuel industry, basically guaranteeing that they are going to have a control over the destruction of the planet for the foreseeable future, undercutting actual legitimate attempts to meaningfully address climate change in a way that is going to prevent a lot of the catastrophic effects that we are already starting to see right now. So, I mean, this bill in and of itself, before Krysten Sinema gets her hands on it, was already watered down and pretty pathetic. It did have some good parts of it, right? Lowering some prescription drug costs in a marginal capacity, some investments in renewable energy, things like that. But on the net equation of all of this, it's not that great of a bill. And even then, even though it is literally written by a millionaire coal baron who is functionally acting like a Republican and has been throughout the entirety of the Biden administration, even that is somehow too far left for somebody as corrupt as Krysten Sinema.